Welcome to Murder with the Missus. I'm Darren.
And I'm Amy, and today we're going to tell you about Dylan Browns.
Don't forget to check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Podbean, and Facebook. Like, share, subscribe. Make sure to hit the notification bell so you get the new episodes whenever they drop, and tell your friends as always.
I waited patiently on this one. A difficult task for me, but I needed the ending, so I waited. And finally, on July 1st of 2024, we got it. 19-year-old Dylan is who we'll be talking about today. He was from Idaho and by all accounts was literally born to be a farmer. That's all he ever wanted to do. He loved to be out working on the land. At 2 years old, he would anxiously wait for his dad, Justin, and his grandpa to get home at the end of the day. At 3 years old, he developed a quirk that he would have for the rest of his life. He found a favorite brand of work boots and wore them until they were wore out, and then would have to have the same exact boots again. At 10 years old, he would grow and sell sweet corn and pumpkins locally. He also would plant sunflowers and black-eyed Susans at his grandma's houses for each of them, which is super cute. When he got older, he worked on other farms and saved his money. In 2019, at 16 years old, his grandparents helped him buy some land in Lucin, Utah, which is an abandoned railroad town in Box Elder County on the Utah-Nevada border. And by some land, I mean 640 acres. This was cheap land because it was in the desert, open land all around. So very remote, to say the least. But cheap land is still land, and Dylan was confident that he could make this his farm. My grandpa told me when I was little that they aren't making any more land, and that stuck with me to this day. Of course, that was before they started building islands in Dubai, but I digressed. He spent a couple of summers out there getting the land ready, and once he graduated high school, he spent more time on the farm. He had a camper out there where he would store stuff and slept a lot of the time. He had dug out a place for a pond and talked to Justin about planting some trees around it and stocking it with fish. He was very excited. He had set up irrigation and was planting alfalfa, one of the few things that would grow out there. There was a neighboring property owned by a friend of Dylan's grandpa, and he had a grain shed. He gave Dylan permission to use the shed to store his grain truck when he needed to. Another person the family knew, Dawn, lived in a trailer on that neighboring land, and there was a squatter named James also staying in a trailer there.
Dylan had worked with both of these men on other farms, even paid them to work for him sometimes.
Right. Now, his mom did tell a story on one of her interviews about how they even came to know Dawn. And I guess he had been injured in 2020 while working with Dylan. And so he ended up staying with Dylan's grandfather, and they both kind of helped him get back on his feet to get better and go through his doctor's appointments and taking care of his medical problems. So that's how they came to know him. And then they had worked together both in Lucin and in Idaho. So Dylan was staying out here and this was his land, but he was also staying at grandparents, staying at his mom's, he was traveling kind of around, but he spent a lot of time on the farm. James had lost his place due to a fire. So Dawn had told him to come out there and stay on the land with him. And that's why they refer to James as being a squatter, because he didn't actually know the landowner enough to give him permission to be on the land. So he was just kind of there. According to Dylan's mom, Candace Cooley, Dylan had employed both of them, so they definitely weren't strangers by any account. Now, James had a horse, and so he had put up a barbed wire fence around where the shed was so that his horse wouldn't wander off or run away. The nearest town to the farm is across the state line in Montello, Nevada. This was a small town of just 59 people. There was a post office, hotel, and 2 bars. They're owned by someone else, but the bars were run by 2 brothers. Kurt runs the Saddle Sore Bar, according to reports, while his brother Troy runs the Cowboy Bar and Grill. It is said that Dylan did spend time at the bars, and it points to another reason why I wanted to wait this one out. There's been so much conflicting information come out on this one, and the police, as we see all the time, were not taking it very seriously. It's hard to keep the facts straight when so many things are being reported incorrectly, and speculation just clouds the case. A lot of people were talking shit on why and how a 19-year-old was in all these bars. Well, unclutch your pearls, Gladys. In a town of 59 people, there's not exactly a McDonald's on every corner. You eat where there's food. And these bars had food. Also, Kurt reportedly had a trailer behind the saddle sore bar, and since there was no running water on the farm, Dylan would shower at Kurt's trailer sometimes. He had slept there too. Keep in mind that a lot has been said about all of these people I've mentioned, even the family, but we're going to try to stick to the facts. Now that we have the background, let's get into the timeline. On Wednesday, May 25th, Dylan told family members that he came across a barefoot man in the desert who was bleeding. He said the man asked to use his phone and for a ride. Now, Dylan did tell his mom that he did not give the man a ride, but it came out later that he did.
Candace said that Dylan left out details about things that he thought would upset her, like picking up the stranger or walking in the desert.
Right. Plus, they knew who this was, and he did not mention the name to them, and they figured that's why, too. They just knew that they wouldn't approve of something like that. Now, on Thursday, the 26th, he talked to Candace about his crop and said he was really excited. He also talked to Justin, but Justin was driving out of town, and the call dropped. On Saturday, May 28th, Dylan talked to his grandma, Karen, who he talked to nearly every day. They talked at around 6:51 a.m., but not for very long because Dylan said it was starting to sprinkle. He needed to get his grain truck to the grain shed before it started really raining. The grain shed was about 5 miles away, and he would usually drive the truck over there to store it and then walk back to his farm. So he told Grandma Karen that he would call her back later. Candace said in a later interview that it started raining lightly at about 5:36 a.m., but heavy rain didn't start until that afternoon, so keep that in mind. When Grandma Karen didn't hear back from him Saturday or Sunday morning, she called Don and asked him to check on things since he was closest to the area. Don and James checked around and told Karen that the grain truck was in the shed and Dylan's truck was at his farm and locked. Monday, May 30th, Candace got a call from one of Dylan's friends asking if she had heard from him. After calling around, they all realized no one had heard from him since he had talked to Grandma Karen early Saturday morning. Candace and Justin went to the farm, and several things stuck out to them right away. Now keep in mind that it rained Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. So when they saw that his truck looked freshly washed, it seemed odd. It's referred to as being pressure washed. Many were thinking that rain cleans things, especially over 3 days. But Dylan would have left at some point. Dirt plus rain makes mud. And there's no mud on the truck. And no tracks where the truck had been moved at any point after it had really started raining. Hell, Candace and Justin left tracks just pulling in that day.
But there was mud on the truck. A lot of people forget to wash the wheel wells.
Mm-hmm.
Dylan's truck had a lot of mud in the wheel wells.
Right. So while the truck was clean and shiny, there's mud caked all under the wheel wells.
Mm-hmm.
And that leads the family to believe that the truck had been moved at some point and then was washed after. I want to mention here as well that there were ruts made by the grain truck going into the shed too. Supposedly, Dylan was moving the truck when it was barely sprinkling to protect the grain. The ground shouldn't have been soft enough at that time to make those ruts. His regular truck was also unlocked. The family says that Dylan never locked anything. They couldn't find his key fob to unlock the truck. They called the Box Elder Sheriff's Office, but that sheriff's office is about 2.5 hours away from the farm, so Justin asked them if he could bust the window. They were told to do whatever they had to do. So Justin busted the window and they got into the truck, where they say the seat was all the way forward, in a position that Dylan couldn't have driven it in. The truck was in 4-wheel drive. The 4-wheel drive on his truck didn't work, so Dylan would not have put it in that position. All of this leads them to believe that someone else drove his truck and that someone else possibly moved the grain truck into the shed much later than when it was believed Dylan was doing it early Saturday morning. As I mentioned, the police didn't take this as seriously as the family did. They said he probably just got tired of farming and walked away. The family knows that is 100% not an option. He was where he wanted to be, doing what he wanted to do. And law enforcement didn't treat this like a crime scene. They didn't test or even look at his truck. They weren't listening to the family at all. And the family feels like they were even being pushed back on some things. The family had to get a search party started. And within an hour and a half, they found his boots thrown behind a dirt pile about 300 yards from the grain shed. This dirt pile was in the opposite direction of Dylan's farm. There was a dark spot on the boots that looked like blood. Police asked if Maybe he was just wearing tennis shoes or some other shoes. But remember, he only wears those boots. He has one pair at a time and only replaces them with the exact same kind. Plus, these boots didn't look like they had been out in the rain for 3 days. Luckily, police did take the boots, but they wouldn't be sent off for testing for a week or so after. But the search was happening. People came out on foot, horseback, ATVs. They did air searches, searched wells and caves.
Don't you love how whenever the cops sit there and, when they're trying to investigate something and they try to, maybe he just gave up. Maybe he just quit.
That's like their favorite thing to do. Maybe he was just tired of his life.
I mean, there's more cases that we've done where, maybe he was just tired of being a dad, or maybe he was tired of being your husband, or, it's just stupid shit. It's just like, how can we deter this away to where we don't have to work as hard? That's
exactly what it is.
Yeah. Ooh. I mean, I don't know. It's just ridiculous. They're asking all the wrong questions.
Well,
and they're not doing what they're supposed to do.
And the way I've always felt is treat everything like a crime scene, but they don't. They don't even try to preserve anything ever.
Yeah,
drives me nuts.
Well, as most people know, Heavy D and Diesel Dave from Diesel Brothers came out to help in the search too.
Yeah, they did.
Help is always welcome, but they record and post it all on their YouTube channel, which brought a lot of awareness into this case. Now, these guys, they do a lot.
They do. I mean, they do the most.
I used to watch their show religiously.
Yes, we did.
I mean, and, whenever it quit and then they started doing their own thing, I didn't know what they was actually doing. And you told me.
Yeah, they popped up.
Yeah, they just popped up and you said that they're doing a lot of search and rescue. And I was like, you know what? That makes a lot of sense.
Right.
Because they was really interested in that.
They are interested in helping for sure.
Yeah.
And they seem very involved. Like they actually give a shit.
Now, I'll tell you what, if they use half the equipment that they built, they're good to go.
So apparently they have their own helicopters. So they actually use those to help search. They have some kind of drone that has so far advanced technology that it's not allowed to be used commercially because it can't be, it's just too good, I guess is what they were saying. So they have definite equipment and definite means to do things that other people cannot.
And that's great. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it's awesome of them for what they're doing.
And I was looking at this one and watching their YouTube videos and stuff on it, and I was seeing other cases that they were doing, and Susan Powell stuck out immediately to me because that's one that's haunted me for a long time. And so I was really excited to see that they're touching on all kinds of things. Mm-hmm. I just love it. I love to see it.
Oh, yeah.
And that, I mean, it helps. It helps with their YouTube channel. They've got millions and millions of people watching that. And to do something like this while there's somebody missing, it's huge for families because so many people don't get that.
Well, yeah. I mean, it gives them somebody that'll step in when other people won't.
Exactly. And plus they doubled the reward. So the family had a $100,000 reward and Heavy D doubled it and offered another $100,000. So that definitely helped too.
That's just awesome.
It's very awesome. Now, when they were doing their helicopter runs and their drone searches, they did show deep ruts in an area that they called the Wash. And the family tried to get the police to take the cadaver dogs over in that direction to search, but they would not, which I don't understand.
Now, go figure.
This is what they were talking about, the pushback. Like, obviously, something had been in that wash. So the wash, to me, looks like I didn't do too much investigation on that part of it, but it looks like almost like a dried out creek or something that has high sides.
Like a ravine or something.
Yes. And they said that a lot of sand will come down off the sides. And supposedly it has been mentioned in this area that if you want to get rid of a body, take them to the wash. Because when it rains, which it does not rain very often in the desert, but when it does, it will literally wash all that sand and bury anything that's in there. So you might have buried something 3 feet deep, but by the time it gets done after that rain, it's going to be 12 feet deep. You know what I mean? Like it's just one of those things. So keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Now on Tuesday, the 31st, they drained Lucen Pond because his phone last pinged there at 3:41 p.m. on Saturday. And do you remember Kurt? He reportedly had the trailer behind the bar that Dylan showered at sometimes. Well, he also called them on that day and said that 2 men were holding Dylan hostage at a house in Montello. Now that's in another county in another state. So the Box Elder police called Elko County, Nevada police about it, and they went and searched the house. Now this house is reportedly where Chase was staying. Chase is who they say was the barefoot man. So remember the man he picked up and he said, oh, I didn't give him a ride, but he did. It was Chase. So they knew that he knew Chase, and they had to figure out that this was one and the same person. But either way, Dylan was not in that house. And Chase did call Candace and said that he did get a ride from Dylan that day. He was actually wearing shoes, so he wasn't barefoot. Dylan let him charge his phone and gave him the rest of an old pop that he had in the truck for him to drink. His name came up quite a bit in the speculation phase of this case because he has a criminal past of DV and stalking. He would be arrested on unrelated charges, but was never considered a real suspect in Dylan's disappearance because it was verified that he was 200 miles away in Ogden, Utah when Dylan went missing. And so they asked Kurt why he would tell them a story about Dylan being held hostage. And he said that a psychic told his wife, who then told his daughter, who then told him. And he wanted it to be checked in case Dylan was alive.
Seriously.
100%. That's what he said.
I mean, look, we went and seen psychic every once in a while. But, for you to pass
it's fun.
Huh?
It's fun.
It's fun. But for you to pass the message through, what, four people?
Yeah, it ran the whole gambit through that family.
Yeah. I mean, Don't you think there'd be some missed information by the time it got to the last person?
Oh, the old telephone game? I remember that, Jim. But now the family actually says that he did this and he called this in because of the $100,000 reward money at the time.
Oh.
Yes.
So what's Kurt's mindset?
This is the only part that Kurt plays in this.
Oh, really?
There's a lot on the speculation side of it before this was a solved case. So I don't really want to get too far into that.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, he doesn't really have a lot of skin in the game, but he does own the place that Dylan was last at too.
The bar where he eats at.
Right. Gotcha. And we'll find out later that is the last place he was seen by other people besides at his farm.
Yeah.
So he did have a little bit to do with it, but to just randomly call that in, they say it was definitely a reward money grab. And then I want to mention, this is the day after the family first became aware that he's disappeared. And so tensions are high, emotions are high. So when they get this call, everybody leaves the farm and goes to Montello. So the farm is now empty. But when they get back to the farm, they notice that Dylan's key fob has just randomly reappeared. So while they know 100% it was not there, his grandparents even brought an extra key fob with them when they came to the property the day before. Somebody came in and laid this fob next to the other one. So it definitely was not there before. And they were taking pictures all inside the camper as to how it was laid out whenever they found it. And it's not in any of those pictures. It was definitely not there. Then the next day, Dylan's pistol showed up on the bathroom counter in his camper. That was something else that was missing. But his aunt had just cleaned the bathroom the day before that. And then bam, there's the gun on the counter. So it has to be someone close enough to be able to see when it's safe and when they wouldn't be caught to be able to bring these things back. And they found out, like I said, the last time he used his card was on Thursday, the 26th at the Saddle Store bar. So they're starting to piece together a little timeline and they're starting to see red flags.
So the gun was missing.
The gun and the fob were missing.
And then after the house was clean, that's when everything showed back up?
So no. So they get a call. They're down there draining the pond.
Okay.
And to find his phone. And they get the call from Kurt, hey, he's being held hostage. So everybody literally leaves the farm. When they come back, the fob is there. His aunt cleaned the camper. And then the next day, boom, gun is there. So it's literally being brought back at different times.
Really?
Yes. Super weird, right? So it obviously has to be somebody close.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to risk walking into...
And somebody within the vicinity.
Yeah, they have to be able to see.
That can get in and out quick.
And not be suspicious.
Yeah.
Exactly. But you got to think too, at this time, there's a lot of search teams out there. There's a lot going on.
Yeah. A lot of volunteers.
A lot of volunteers. Yeah. So it's somebody who's super close.
Yeah.
And the family says they started seeing red flags on day one. And
so hold on.
Go ahead.
So where did the fob show up at?
The fob showed up laid on the counter next
on the counter and next to the gun?
Nope. So that
was the next day.
Yeah.
Oh.
So on the day the fob came back, it was literally laying next to the spare fob that his grandparents had to bring so they could get into the truck.
Oh, that's weird.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next day the gun was on the counter.
Yep.
Where, like, in the same spot?
Close, because it's a little camper, yeah.
So it was one of the things where it was like, all right, this ain't right.
It totally stuck out 100%.
Okay. I'm sorry to be sticking to this.
No, piece it together. You're good. You're good. That's how we work around here. Start putting things together. And like I said, day one, the family, very perceptively, are side-eyeing Dawn and James because they're the two closest. They're the last two that was in the vicinity where he was. And they live, so he's taking the grain truck to the grain shed, which is the property they are staying at. So we're looking at basically, possibly, the last two people who saw him. And then they find out that they didn't find out. The family knew that Dylan had fired Dawn about 6 weeks before this. While he was a friend of his grandpa's, Dylan didn't like him as much as his grandpa did, but they did work together and they got along fine, but they would have their little spats. So apparently they got into it about a washing machine motor, and they hadn't talked to each other for 6 weeks, but Dylan had been away working and he wasn't there much, so they didn't really have time to patch things up, his mom said. And plus, many say that some of the squatters in the area, because apparently this is a high squatter zone, that they would work with Dylan sometimes, and they were kind of like having a hard time taking orders from a kid, even though the kid had been farming his whole life. And speculation is that Dawn kind of felt that way too, and James was a little jealous of how much Dylan had at such a young age. James also had a criminal past. In the 80s, he was charged with attempted murder for shooting someone over a disagreement at work. Then he got in trouble for being a felon with a firearm in 2012. Justin told a local news station that the family knew him, but he was definitely not considered a family friend like the police were saying. He even talked with Dylan about him. He could see the contempt and jealousy that James seemed to have towards Dylan because I guess James was always talking shit on him.
The cops really dropped the ball with James. They watched, him take 4 garbage bags of trash out of the shed and haul them off.
Literally watched him do it.
Why?
Literally watched him. They didn't check the bags. They didn't check where he took them.
So did anybody check the bags?
Nobody could. He went to a whole nother town that day, so it could have been dumped anywhere between the two places.
Good night.
Yeah. Now, they did ask him what he was doing, and he told them he was spring cleaning. But if you look in that shed, there's stuff piled everywhere. So he took specific things out of that shed that day. Yeah. This is why the family's so frustrated with the cops. Because what can they do? They can't track him down and start ripping open trash bags. Then it's like tampered evidence. You can't mess with it anymore.
Well, I mean, if they would have followed him, figured out where he dropped the trash, then it becomes public property.
The police could, yes. Well, the family could too.
The family could too.
But I'm not 100% sure that they knew what was going on. The cops did.
Well, I mean, either way, if this is an ongoing investigation or search,
yeah,
then they should have been looking into every little detail. If you see somebody taking out trash on the property,
yes, the police, yes,
they need to have been like, stop, hold on, let me look at this
exactly
before you haul off anything that could be crucial to what we're looking for.
Exactly, I'm with you.
Yeah, dumbasses.
Now, Candace and Justin also said that James was right there. As soon as they got there the first day, he was there trying to help. I'm using my air bunnies there in case you can't hear it in my voice. He was frustrated that Dylan had backed into his horse gate. Now, maybe it's me, but if I'm squatting on someone else's land, I'm going to know my place. And he's out there rocking boats and shaking trees. And James got mad about all the people being out there. And the police ended up asking the family to leave because they were irritating him, the man squatting on the land.
It's not his fucking property.
Exactly. This is the man who was at the last place a missing person was known to be.
At this point, it's the family's property.
What?
Until he shows up and says, hey, I'm back.
No, I'm talking about on the land James is squatting on. That's not Dylan's land.
Oh.
Yeah. No, he wasn't squatting on Dylan's land.
Oh, okay.
A lot of reports have said that.
About to say.
This is part of the misinformation. A lot of reports have said he was squatting on Dylan's land, but he was not. He was on a neighbor's land.
Oh.
Yes. They were 5 miles away from each other, but you could probably see them. It's like open, vast land.
Well, that's fine then. If I was a family, I'd just move over to Dylan's land and be like, hey.
Well, let me rile you up one more time.
Right.
James also, at this time, had an active felony warrant.
Go figures.
Yeah.
Go figure. He had a warrant out for him right then.
Right then. The whole time the cops are there searching.
And
he's literally got a warrant.
I'm sure they ran his name.
I'm sure they did not.
No.
So
no, they just ran, James.
Either they ran his name and ignored it, or they didn't run his name at all.
No, they just took his first name, James. They didn't run his whole name.
We looked at James. He was actually
he
also
James.
He also goes
James
by
such and such.
He also goes by Jim. So they were like, "Oh, we looked up Jim. Oh, we didn't look up James. Look up his government name, folks."
Well,
no.
even if they looked him up as Jim, whatever his last name, it's still going to pull up James Brenner.
It should,
and they'll ask him, "Hey, is your name James?"
Yeah, because it's supposed to list your aliases. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to go with no. They did not pull his name or run his name at this time. But on June 11th, the police asked the FBI to join the case. Yay. At this point, they know that the dark spot on the boots was blood, but they're waiting for further DNA testing. So they went in and started serving some search warrants. Don told the FBI and the Box Elder Sheriff's Department that James asked him to keep 3 guns for him, saying it was for his own safety. That the last time he had trouble with the law, they took everything from him, and he didn't want the things that he had left to be taken away. They also found guns and ammo in James's trailer, so James was arrested on June 30th, again, for being a felon with a firearm. He was officially named a suspect in Dylan's disappearance in July. But this isn't the movies. All this DNA testing and stuff takes time. The testing on the boots did come back as being Dylan's blood, but it also had James's DNA on the boots. When asked how his DNA could get there, James said he found them near the shed and took them and threw them behind the dirt pile.
So you work for the man.
Yes.
And you're telling me, see, I work for a lot of people.
Over your years? Yeah.
Over my years. And one thing I've always noticed is their footwear.
Is that the one thing you've always noticed?
No, I mean, obviously, because I was a welder. So you have to look down and make sure, hey, you got steel-toed boots on.
Okay.
Stuff like that. You're telling me for 1 second that James never looked at this man's boots and thought, oh, these can't be his.
Oh, no, he knew whose boots they were.
But he said that he didn't.
No, he said he found them next to the shed.
Near the shed, so he took them and threw them?
He took them and threw them 300 yards away.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because people can throw that far.
James could not. I'm going to tell you now. I mean,
3 football fields, really?
I'm definitely profiling James right now, but he is a 60-year-old man. He could not have done that.
Yeah.
And they were also in the opposite direction of the farm. So Dylan's farm was east of the shed, and the dirt pile they were found behind was west
of the
shed.
Yeah.
So opposite direction.
Was it towards the wash?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, Candace said in an interview with the local news that the phone records show that Dylan called James after he got off the phone with Grandma Karen that morning. That was a detail that they did not release originally. So up until a certain point, everyone just thought that he had talked to his grandma and that was it. But then it did come out, no, he had called James, likely to open the gate so that he could put the grain truck into the shed. She said Dylan was at the gate to enter the shed at 6:57 a.m. If you give it another 5 minutes, he's up at the shed around 7:02 to 7:03. Dylan's phone leaves the shed property at 7:43 and goes to Dylan's farm. Roughly 30 minutes later, it comes back and stays. I remember it last pinged at the Lucin Pond at 3:41 p.m. that day. But the real issue for James is in the form of a time-lapsed video. It appears he inadvertently did the swipe thing on the phone, which opens the camera. I accidentally do that all the time on mine when I'm carrying it around. But this video is time-stamped at 7:27 a.m. and shows James with blood on his shirt and arms while he's cleaning a gun inside of his trailer.
The shirt was tested and the blood on it was Dylan's.
Yep. So he accidentally recorded himself cleaning the murder weapon.
What a fucking idiot.
Hey, call me an idiot. I do it all the time. Like I'll accidentally, if I'm carrying it, swipe to the left or up or whatever you do. And I look down and my camera's on. So I guarantee you that's what he did.
Okay, so now they got him.
Now they got him.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
But he's not giving up the location.
Hold up. So James was charged with aggravated murder in March of 2023, along with abuse or desecration of a human body. Aggravated murder is the only charge in Utah that can get you the death penalty. He must have thought he was working with Wayne Brady because he was trying to make a deal. He tried to plead down to second-degree manslaughter with self-defense, and the family said no. They needed to be able to bring Dylan home. They all agreed that if he told them where the remains were, he could plead guilty to second-degree felony murder along with the other 2 gun charges. The family was not allowed to be there for 3 days while the police worked, but police were able to retrieve Dylan's remains on April 9th of 2023. Candace said the actual location of where the remains were will not be revealed. What we do know is that he died of a gunshot wound to the head. On July 1st of 2024, so just the other day, James was sentenced to 1 to 15 years for each of the 3 charges. 2 will run concurrent and 1 consecutive, so he will be eligible for parole in 30 years. The judge told him to look behind him at the people in the courtroom at sentencing, and the coward just shook his head and refused. The judge said that he would instruct the parole board to keep him inside prison for as long as they could legally do so. And the family continues to fight. They said that the deputies work in this case were pretty great, but there was a big issue with the officers with higher ranks. The family feels like they had to push the case to a conclusion and have a big issue with them not listening when they first started. Yep.
They know the victim better than the cops do. They should have listened more.
Yeah.
And the whole thing is, you know, he's got, what, 30 years?
Yeah, he's got 30 years.
So he'll be 90?
Yes, he's 60 now, so he'll be 90 when he's eligible for parole.
So more than likely he'll die in prison.
Yes. And this is like Occam's razor, so the simplest answer is usually the one. You got this guy who has resentment, means, opportunity, proximity. Why not check him out right off the bat? If not just to rule him out.
All they had to do is run his name.
Had they ran it immediately, they could have arrested him day 1 on that warrant. And then they would have found Dylan's fob and pistol in his possession, along with whatever in the hell he had in those trash bags.
Yep.
But hindsight's always 20/20. Now, a couple of months before sentencing, Candace started Dylan's Legacy at dylanroundslegacy.org. The website says it aims to provide resources, guidance, and emotional support to those affected by similar circumstances. She's also working with the politicians to get some things done there too. And there is a split among the general public about them cutting a deal. But with him being 60 and not eligible for parole till he's 90, I can see how they got there since their goal was to bring Dylan home. It's a hard decision to make, and it was theirs to make. I know it affects society if someone cuts a deal with, say, a 20-year-old and they'll be out in 5 years or something, but that's not the case here.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, you know, the whole thing is he's going to be 90 but before he's even up for parole.
Right.
And more than likely, he's going to die in prison.
More than likely.
More than likely.
But we've seen our judicial system work.
Yeah. As long as the judge did his part and said he was going to talk to the parole board and make sure that he spent every damn time, every second he legally can in there, then more than likely, I would have done the same thing. I would have wanted to bring my boy home too so I could give him a proper burial.
Well, Heavy D did ask them in one of his interviews, what is the conclusion for you? Now, this was before they'd found the remains.
Yeah.
He said, what is your conclusion? And she said, to know where he is, to know he didn't suffer, to know what happened. And so this is how they got that, because he was not talking. He could have just shut his mouth and went on about his business, because even death penalty cases, he would likely have died sitting on death row.
Yeah.
As old as he is. So they had to do what they had to do to get Dylan back.
Yeah. I bet he was in the wash.
They won't say.
Yeah, that's my guess. Well, I'm glad that Heavy D and Diesel Dave, they stepped in and helped him out. That's awesome to see.
Yes.
You know.
Use your powers for good.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that the family got the, answers that they wanted.
That's true. You can't really call it closure because, like she said, and I 100% agree, I believe I've said it on here before, you don't get closure when you have someone taken from you.
Yeah.
There's no closure. It doesn't get better. It doesn't change.
No,
you just learn to live with it. But this gives them, like you said, answers.
It gives them the answers they wanted.
Can't fault that.
No.
Now, since he used to plant sunflowers and black-eyed Susans for his grandmothers, people have started planting them all across America in his memory. So if you feel the urge, plant away, you green thumbs.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
They're everywhere.
Yeah, they are.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure you guys catch us on the next one. Don't forget to subscribe. Tell your friends.
Bye.